From NJ.com and the Heldridge Hotel, welcome to the Rutgers Rant, your one-stop podcast for the Scarlet Knights, with your host, Steve Politi, and Rutgers insider Brian Fonseca. Let's start shopping.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the Rant. It's been a minute. How you doing? Good to see you again on the Rant.
I missed you, Steve. It's been a long time.
You missed me? Aw, thank you. I miss talking about Rutgers sports. We didn't have much to talk about, but now we do. We've caught up. We got a lot of things to catch up on. Got some spring football, quarterback controversy. We met the controversial coach. We got some basketball portal, women's basketball news, gymnastics news. President Tate tweeted, which I love. We'll talk about that at the end, answer some questions. We should start with the frown. And I'm calling it the frown instead of the crown. 3 weeks for that. We waited all this time. We're like, oh, they're going to come back. It's going to be some fantastic new thing we hadn't seen. The same exact team doing the same exact stuff. And they lost to Creighton. What were your impressions of the frown? Brown.
Shocker. First of all, I want to say, I did a live show last week, and I think a lot of the fans missed you as well, because it felt like there was an influx of about 20 people. And then as soon as they saw it was just me and not us, they're like, all right, I'm getting out of here. No Politi, no party. Get out.
Exactly. They don't want to hear you.
Yeah. As far as the crown goes, the first 10 minutes got people probably thinking, wow, this is what happens when you give Rutgers 3 weeks of prep. This is what happens when, a team has time to work together and practice. And this is vintage Steve Peichel Rutgers basketball, like preparation, hounding them defensively, moving the ball offensively. Rutgers really has something here. And in the last half hour, they just completely collapse into what they've been for the first 4 months of the year. Yeah. And to your point, I think the feeling at the end of it is just kind of like they extended the season for 3 weeks for that. Was it worth it? Probably not.
No. And if it did distract at all from what's happening next, the assurances were, hey, we can walk and chew gum at the same time. A lot of teams turn it down because they want to focus on what's coming next. Rutgers said, we want to play. We want to develop. It's good practice. The guys want to play. The guys didn't look like they wanted to play. I mean, I don't know, 4 for 29 during one stretch. Like, ooh, it's just the same stuff. It's the same team. I will say that it accomplished the one thing for me. If there was any lingering doubt, you were like, oh, they did play a little better late in the season. Maybe drastic changes are not necessary. Maybe if they plug in a couple of new guys. No, like that disavowed me of that. This is a team that needs a reboot, needs a roster overhaul. I just don't know. I'm less convinced than ever that that's going to happen.
Well, we'll find out in about, 36 hours when the transfer portal officially opens. There's been no movement yet, which is a bit surprising. I would have thought somebody would have announced their intentions, over the last 3 days between them losing and before the portal opening. I don't know if that indicates there won't be as much movement as we think. Probably not. I think there's some clear locks of people who aren't going to leave, whether from their own accord or from being nudged out of the door. But there is some interest about how many guys they keep. I'm starting to think they're going to keep more guys than I thought. Right? Yeah. I think the number we picked was 5. I can see somewhere around 6 or 7 even. I don't know if that changed. Your mind has been changed over the last 3 days, but I certainly agree with you that the nice impression they left Chicago with after they beat Minnesota, they looked great. You feel like there's something there that completely evaporated over the last half hour of the crown. No doubt.
Well, let's drill down into that. Like which guys when the announcements start, who's going to be the first guys to go? What do you think?
Well, I think the clear guys that are going to, they just don't belong at this level or by fall. I mean, the guy didn't play when he was healthy, then he got hurt. Let's see who else. It's been a while since
Javonte Ware. I mean,
Javonte Ware is interesting, right? Like, do they view him as a developmental project? I don't think so, because again, this is the worst center tandem in the history of major basketball, and he didn't play a second, right? Outside
for what? Yeah.
Right. So I would see Javonte Ware being a candidate there. Yeah. Dennis Badelau probably. We know for a fact he's not good enough for this level, so that didn't really work out.
If you didn't get on the floor at the crown, I think you're good. I think you're done. That's a good analysis.
Well, the thing is, Harun Zerno, for example, didn't play for the entire first half, and then he was in the second half. So there's some of that as well. I think a little different from that. Oh, and then Bryce Dortch, I think, would close out that group of guys who are just probably not good enough to play at this level. It was probably better suited going down a level. And then a guy who is at a different spot who I think is kind of interesting. I would put these two guys in the same category of Dylan Grant and Jermichael Davis. Like, I think in the right scenario, both of those guys could come back if they can find an agreement with role and financial. But I just don't know if that is for Grant. I think that is probably not possible, right? I just think Grant would have to probably take a pay cut and play a smaller role. Doesn't make sense for him. Jermichael Davis, I could see him finding a way of being a veteran guy off the bench for this team if he wants to stay.
I agree with the latter. I think that you're right. Jermichael Davis. Okay. Well, you know what? I like it here. I'm happy at Rutgers. I don't think I'm going to make more money someplace else. I don't need to go to a UNC Greensboro or Wilmington to get 30 minutes a game. I want to be a Big Ten player. I'm going to be part of this solution here. I could see that. Dylan Grant, I can't see it all. And it's not, I think he's talented, but we just haven't seen the development. I think for his own good, he's one of these guys that should go. Like, you should try someplace, get new coaching, get a different voice. Like, we forget that there were reasons players transferred before the transfer portal. Like, before it was just everyone transferred. There's like good reasons to do it. He just hasn't gotten any better. If anything, he regressed. So if you're that guy, you have to move on. And I think for Rutgers, you have to move on because that's the position, one of the two positions you need to immediately address. Center and power forward. And point guard to a lesser degree. But you got to upgrade the front court. You can't go into another season with what we had here.
The Dylan Grant thing that's also, and not to pile on the kid, but I think the one thing that is a disconnect between him and the program is just like the lack of a motor. Like the rebounding numbers for some of the games he's played, and he was asked to rebound above all else, and just some of the rebound numbers are just really, really bad. And that's not what Steve Peichel and his staff are looking at for players. They want guys who, above all else, play hard as hell and attack the glass, and he just didn't really fit that archetype this year. On center and power forward, two interesting names that are in the portal already that would fit the MO of Rutgers under Steve Peichel in that they pursue guys who they recruited before, right? I know we've said that they need to expand their horizons beyond that, but I still think that is going to be one of the early points of emphasis. Bayan Dongo from Georgia Tech, former Rutgers commit, decommitted and went to Georgia Tech behind Carl Hobbs. Carl Hobbs and that entire staff had been fired already, so now he's in the portal, has one more year. He's an interesting guy who could play, power forward, center, probably a little undersized for center, but some really good numbers as far as blocks, rebounding, would fit what they look for in a power forward. And this morning, Amari Monroe, he is in the portal because he's a grad transfer. Quinnipiac player, said in the offseason last year he was 95% going to Rutgers before deciding to come back to Quinnipiac, was recruited very hard by Steve Peichel, is again a center that fits the mold of what they want out of a center. He's in the portal, knowing nothing, having seen this 5 minutes before we started recording. My question with that is Rutgers still going to be in the hunt for him, or is he in the portal looking for higher horizons, right? He had some interest from big teams before last year, but Rutgers was probably right about the level he could get. Is he at a point where he wants for his last year to go even higher, or is he still going to be interested in Rutgers? Because if he is interested in Rutgers, that to me seems like a clear target at center.
But does that elevate your center forward position to the top third of the Big Ten? Adding those two guys,
it would elevate them much further than they were last year. That's
well,
for sure.
I mean, we're done. That's not good enough. We know that's not good enough. So
here's something to consider. Jerry Carino had in his story this morning on Rutgers priorities, Najai Hines, the star freshman center from Seton Hall, he is in the portal. He is asking for, according to Carino, $3 million, right? So if you want a player of high caliber enough to be in the top third of the Big Ten, which is the place where all the good bigs go, you're going to have to pay $3 million. And if we're assuming Rutgers is at the high end of what we believe they could have, which is $10 million, are you willing to put 30% of your budget on one player at a key position? That is the question here, and I'm not sure the answer is yes.
Yeah, well, I mean, I know the answer is yes. They're going to have to. The answer is absolutely yes. I mean, of course, yes. Right? I think it is.
Well,
why would it not be? Why would you not? We have seen now, we've not just a small window. We ruined Dylan Harper and Ace Bailey's year because they didn't have a center. What about this couldn't be any clearer? Yes, you've got to compete in the deep end of the pool. You need a Big Ten center. And this is and I get it. I think Amari Monroe would be a great addition to this team. He is 6'7", 210 pounds.
Right. He's probably fits more the mold of the power forward than center, no doubt.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Now, what we think is different than what is is reality what they think at not the Hale Center, at the APC or whatever. I think it is worth making a splash at center and spending a lot of your money there and rolling the dice and being assuring that position. Well, I think the argument would be not only at center, at other positions, is that if you spend 30% of your purse on one player and heaven forbid he gets hurt, then your season's over, right?
Right.
I think beyond a center thing, that's a philosophical roster thing where you would rather have good players and more depth than high end players. That's the question Rutgers is going to have to answer. I don't know what the right answer is, but you can't have both.
But they had 4 non-functional centers. They had 4 non-Big Ten centers. But 3.5, if you want to give Breithurst playing out of position, give him like a.
I guess the question is this: let's say you allocate $3.5 million to the center position, right? The entire position. Is it better to spend $2 million and $1.5 million on 2 centers, or is it better to spend $3 million on one guy and then $500,000 or $1 million on the other? That's the question.
Good question. Yeah, I don't know. It really is a philosophical thing. But they can't be afraid to. They just can't be afraid to put all their eggs in, and most of their eggs in one basket. I think that's going to be what happens in a lot of cases. Interesting quote, and this is funny. I'm sure you saw it. It was made all of the rounds. An anonymous quote, Big Ten coach, saying teams below 12 million in NIL are going to be in trouble, and that number is hilarious to me because all of this time the feeling was, Rutgers is they're doing well. They're doing great. They've got up to 9-10 million. Like that was the big thing. Over 10 million. They're ready to go. And my understanding that includes NIL and the rev share, that they're going to be able to invest in this team. The headlines now are war chest, right? And then you see this quote and you're like, all right. I mean, I don't know. We don't know if it's enough yet, but I mean, believe me, not that I want to hear. You can't use it as an excuse this year. You must be able to develop. You must be able to build a team. You're always going to have less resources than Michigan. It's just the way it is. But at the same token, it's a fascinating thing now that they've already been priced out of the money they think they're going to have.
Well, that's where I think the top third of the Big Ten thing you mentioned before, right, where we have to calibrate expectations. Rutgers is going to be competitive with this money, and there's going to be no excuse if they finish near the bottom of the Big Ten again, right?
Right.
This year, it made sense. They had a bottom 3 budget. They exceeded that in theory by finishing whatever they finished, 14th or whatever, right? So they're going to have enough money where you can't say, we're the bottom third of the Big Ten with the money. But we can't expect them to start competing with Illinois, Michigan State, Purdue, because those guys remain in a different stratosphere. And that's the same way as a team that I look at it as a player. You can't expect Rutgers to get a top 8 center in the Big Ten probably, right? I mean, you expect them to have better than the worst center in high major basketball for the third year in a row. But I think what one should expect is a competent, above average center. That should be the goal. You shouldn't be disappointed if they don't get Hunter Dickinson or Zach Edey or whatever. I guess that's the
right. Yeah. I mean, and that's what Seton Hall's losing for $3 million a year. It's like that kid. That kid is not. He's good, but he's not he's Hunter Dickinson. He's not. He's not a star either.
He could be.
He could be.
He might not be there right now,
right.
But if you get that kid in shape, he could be a mauler, no doubt.
Mm-hmm. Right. All right. Backcourt. Tariq Francis. We've talked about it a lot. I'm not going to let one. I mean, not a good game. Shot 3 for 15. Still managed to get 19 points because he's so good at the foul line. Once again, though, this off, and I don't know how much I blame him, but certainly it's what we've seen of him is that the offense eventually becomes him throwing up, just driving into bodies, hoping he gets a foul. And he does most of the time, 12 for 12 from the line against Creighton, but that's not good enough either. I think they're going to bring him back. What do you see the makeup of this backcourt?
So I would be shocked if Tariq Francis isn't back, right? I think that's pretty much maybe not confirmed, but from what he told us at the Big Ten tournament and all indications that Brandon Knight is going to be back and everything, the kid loves Rutgers. I would be pretty shocked if he doesn't come back. So you would assume that if he's back, he's probably going to play a prominent role in the backcourt. I think Rutgers would be in a better position if he comes off the bench and they have 2 better guards. I'm not sure that's going to happen. I would think Rutgers will have to get at least one guard, whether that's a point guard, which I think would be the best case scenario, a proven point guard to play alongside Tariq, or another combo guard that they can, they could both be on the ball. But you have to get a guard, a top end guard, much like you have to get a top end center or high end center, you need to get a high end guard. And then the question is, how much of the depth will be back from this year's team and how much will you have to build depth through the portal? I think in an ideal scenario, you bring back Lino Mark. And I think there's a question of, will they bring back Jermichael Davis, right? If you bring back Jermichael Davis, you probably only have to get one other guard from the portal. If you lose Jermichael Davis, you're probably gonna have to get a veteran guard. And then Lino Mark, obviously, if he leaves or stays, will determine whether or not they get another guard. So you tell me, would you, if you had a choice, right? And I don't know if Rutgers will have this choice, but if you had a choice, would you bring back Lino Mark and Jermichael Davis and deal with whatever floor they present? Or would you say sayonara to both and take a gamble in getting 2 new guards out of the portal?
That's a great question. I certainly think that there's upside with Lino Mark. I don't think he's there yet. I would bring him back to come off the bench. My question is, does he want to come back? Like he's one of the guys. He was really developing. He was coming along. I remember the game against USC. We thought, geez, I wonder if they're going to come in and say, hey, they're recruiting him off the bench in the post game handshake to go home. So that's my question with him. I certainly would want him back at the right price. But yeah, no, if I'm Rutgers, I want a guard who's taller, rangier, plays better defense, but also can hit the three. Of course, every team in the country wants that. They have to improve their three-point shooting. They're not long enough to play Steve Pikiell's defense either. That's been a problem we've talked about a million times on the show. So yeah, I mean, I think if I can't have both them back. If Tariq Francis is coming back, I need to go into the portal and find a rotational 30-minute a game guy who can defend, preferably handle the ball a little bit, do all the things that a Big Ten guard can do.
So I would say, it's hard to do all this stuff because it's a puzzle, not knowing who's coming or going or whatever. But I would say we would agree on these things. These 3 positions, they absolutely need a high-end player or at least an upgrade from what they have. Center, obviously. Guard, ideally a point guard, or at least to your point, a 3-and-D, lengthy guy, wing, whatever.
Yeah.
And a power forward, a guy based on how they like to play who could be physical inside, a Eugenio Maruri type, a guy who can get to the glass, as Miles Dredd called them, goons. A guy who can get to the glass and play physically and do something that they haven't had in a while there.
Yes, absolutely. Totally. So we'll see if Steve Pikiell agrees. I think another surprising thing, we're also seeing a lot of staff movement. I think until otherwise, it looks like we're running it back. I have not seen any indication that we're going to be changing coaches. You would have expected or thought that there'd be some movement already in that area before the portal opened. I don't know. What's your sense?
Coaching contracts run until June, so I could see some movement happening later in the summer. There's a lot of guys whose contracts end in June.
Right,
and that's probably like the second wave of coaching changes in college basketball. I don't know if college basketball is a sport like football where you're going to fire a guy between the end of the season and the portal so that they can come in and you bring their players from the other team. I don't know how realistic that was, even if they didn't go to the Crown. So again, I am less. I had higher expectations of them making staff changes when the season ended. I am less feeling that now than I did then, but I would still be surprised if there's not some movement. You can't run back the entire thing again for a 3rd year in a row after 3 losing seasons. You can't do that.
Gun to your head, predictions here. Do you think Ndongo and Monroe are the 2 main targets, or are they going to surprise us? But that's the other thing we've talked about, is that their portal strategy is like, hey, we recruited that guy, Darren Buchanan. Hey, we knew him really well. Like that's the number one strategy that they've used. We were supposed to change that with a real GM, or someone who's diving in and looking at the entire world of college basketball, not this minor subset of people we know. These are 2 people we know. This falls into that subset. Not that they're bad players, but are they the 2 main targets, or are we going to go further away?
I could certainly see them both being early targets. And it's one thing, Rutgers could target them all they want. It's whether the kids want to come here as well, right? But I think they're going to be early targets, certainly. And I think Rutgers will be happy to get both of them, or one of them at least. I don't know if you can get both because they play, same size, same position probably.
Right.
But yeah, I would expect them to target both of them. Now the question is, will they cast a wide net? That's essentially the question you're asking. I would hope so. Yeah. But we'll see. That's going to be the question that will answer the portal philosophy, right? Like if they can cast the wide net and get a guy that we've never heard of, wouldn't even think to connect. Because to your point, most of the portal additions they've had recently are like 1 degree or 2 degrees of separation from this program's past or an assistant coach. If they get a guy that's completely off the radar, like Rick Pitino getting a point guard from Idaho State, that kind of deal, then we'll know if they're casting a wide range net or not.
do you think we'll spend a lot of time charting European players? Are we going to be pulling up stats from, the Bosnian Elite League here in the coming weeks?
I do know they've been looking at European players. They had an assistant coach in Germany watching a game a month ago or something. That was the one tidbit I had heard. So they're looking into the market, as they should. Any competent Division One staff, after watching what Illinois did, should be doing that. The question is, how high quality of a European player are they going to target? Because as we learned this year, there is a major difference between Serbia and Bosnia, for example. And how high can they aspire to recruit those guys? Because it's one thing to want to get them; they still cost money. But I think they'll look at it. I would be surprised if they didn't have a European player on the roster. But I don't think it's going to be a major focus or anything.
I will tell you, and I've been fascinated watching this Final Four and the strategies the teams that got here used through the portal. I mean, Michigan, obviously, we have a lot of money. We're just going to build a really good team. I mean, I don't think there's much secret there. Danny Hurley said something fascinating just about how the portal changed his strategy from, we're going to get really great defensive players to we need guys who can score, who are, I'm going to murder the quote, but who are willing to play a high level defense too. Like that, he changed his thinking entirely. Meanwhile, Illinois, the way they built it through the European guys and relying on agents who essentially, form that team for them, based on what I read, which is fascinating. I mean, it's just, there's a lot of way to do it and be right.
There's a lot of ways to skin a cat, right? Ultimately, it all boils down to getting really, really good players, having really good coaching, playing optimal basketball, and but the most important thing is having talent, because that Michigan team is so well coached, but they're also so much better than you because they have those two elite centers. They have a point guard who's a veteran. They have shooting. They have the best player in the country, maybe, in Yaxel. They have pretty much everything, which is why I would be surprised if Yukon wins. But Yukon has voodoo devil magic. They have never lost a national championship game, and I would be 0% surprised if they pulled this one out of their rear end again.
Absolutely. Yeah. Danny Hurley, Jersey City, baby. Mrs. Hurley. My favorite moment of the NCAA tournament in many years. Or choice words. Holy. All right. Want to make a bold prediction? Give me a bold prediction before we're done. Give me one thing that people are going to go, wow.
For the transfer portal, Rutgers basketball, you're saying, yes?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
I will say we will be surprised at the level of the center they get. That's my bold prediction. And this is a prediction. This is not reporting. This is just, I have a sense that they will finally learn a lesson and splash on a high level center.
So you think they're going to spend the 30% of their budget on a center?
It's a bold prediction for a reason. It's because I'm not sure I believe it, but it is a prediction. So that's where I'll go. They're going to spend big on a center and make a big splash at that position.
Right. Okay. My prediction is that there's a guy we have discussed here who we thought is a goner will be back, because I think they are good at this one thing they do. People like Steve. People like the program. I think the players are treated pretty well. I don't know if it'll be Dylan Grant, but it wouldn't surprise me if Badalau or some of these guys who we think are out the door, or Bryce Dorich would be like, you know what? I'm staying here. That's my bold prediction. Can't tell you which one, but I think we're going to go, wow, hey, didn't see that coming. So
run it back by fall.
Run it back. That's it. This is the year. But this is the year he's going to figure it out.
Former McDonald's All-American. People forget.
It's true. Absolutely. Yes. Couldn't get those guys when they were good. All right. So we'll come back next week and hopefully we'll have some ideas of what this team's going to look like. Spring football practice, though. That's what you've been doing. Standing out in the cold, watching football. No? A little bit?
Well, let's be clear. We're watching no football. I have watched zero football in spring.
Zero football? Stretching?
Yes. I watched one stretch and I thought that was enough. So we have not watched any football, but we've talked to a lot of people on the football team, including the head coach, the offensive coordinator, and the two quarterbacks going to choose from. Sounds like it's going to be a battle. Both of them said the same things. And right now, I know exactly what I knew a month ago, which is that both of them have their merits. One has starting experience. One has 2 years of experience under Straka's system. I don't know how both of them look throwing a football necessarily, but it should be an interesting battle. Where do you feel right now it's going to land? What side are you on? What side of the fence?
Yeah, I tell you, I'm at coin toss territory. I think they've invested a lot in Cerise, and I think they want him to win the competition. If I had to guess, if you went in there and said this, but I think the fact that they knew they had to go out and get a starter um, tells me that they're not quite as convinced based on what they've seen behind the scenes. And this is again me connecting the dots, and they do not want to go in a situation where they have a starter who's not ready. So this is one thing I'm certain that we'll be sitting there Thursday before the morning, and we will not know the answer to the question. They might know the answer, but we'll be sitting there going, oh, like it'll be right up to the wire until Pete Thamel tweets it at 2 hours before the game. That's my prediction.
I wouldn't doubt it. Not a great reflection on us, but I think that's the most likely scenario, no doubt. I think some of getting a transfer quarterback is also the fact, like you've seen other teams, Wisconsin, for example, Syracuse, who had one starting quarterback, and once his season was ending because of an injury, their season was over, right? So I think
had to do it. Absolutely, yes.
Rutgers wanted some insurance on that end as well, which is the responsible thing to do. I'm trying to take away because we see these things from like 10 feet away. I'm trying to go 30,000 feet and just look at what we have in front of us. We have a former 4-star quarterback with starting experience in a Power 5 league, who was a junior, was handpicked by the coordinator who really liked him. I just think Lonergan just makes the most sense to win the battle, right? And I think Cerise is going to have to overcome that and win. Now, the thing is this. I don't know if you want a definitive winner. I don't know if you want to leave the spring being like, okay, this guy is clearly better than the other, or if you want a close battle. If you have a guy that's clearly better than the other, you feel good about that one guy, but you're not sure about the other. Now, if they're both close, it's either because they're both really good and you can't choose between the both of them, or they're both not as good as you hoped and you're kind of picking the lesser of two evils, right? So I'm not sure what the best case scenario is.
Yeah, no, I think the best case scenario is having a guy win it outright. I do think so. Yeah. And to your point, exactly why, because I think it's very unlikely that both of these guys are like, whoa, hey, we got two perfect options. So yeah, I think if halfway through camp, if they don't know who the guy is, there would be reason to be like, internally, I mean, not us. We're not going to know. We're probably not going to know. I doubt we're going to know. But internally, I think they would want to know who it is.
That's what Kirk said, right? Kirk essentially said that they were hopeful that Kirk and Schiano both said that this stuff will play itself out. And I think, to your point, 15 practices is probably more than enough to see what they have, what they're working with. And I would guess they're not going to tell us, to your point. The last time there was a quarterback battle, they had to tell us because Gavin was going to enter the portal. This year, there's no spring portal, so there's no incentive to show your hand. Though I think Joe Harris-Simiak, who was at Rutgers for 3 years, can kind of piece things together and figure out who the starting quarterback is well before the season opens.
Right. Tell us about some of your interviews. There was a very interesting one that I enjoyed. Colorful assistant coach, of course, which does us very little good because we'll never hear from him again. But in the one spring interview we had.
Yeah, I mean, we talked to every assistant coach in the spring, obviously, and we had the pleasure of talking to Jim Turner, the offensive line coach, on Saturday. And I don't know what you expected in your head, right? You've heard of his credentials, obviously, a Boston guy, former Marine, longtime offensive line coach. I don't know what stereotype you had in your head, but he lived up to every stereotype possible.
That was it. That was what I expected. He delivered. If I had to guess, that he delivered. Absolutely. And you asked him the question. I mean, take us through. Obviously, he's had some controversies in his past. We talked about it in the podcast. We had an entire episode pretty much like, hey, was this the right decision? Granted, we didn't have much to talk about at the time, but it was a controversial thing. It was sort of a topic. What did he say about that?
He had controversy around him, right? He was in the Wells report at Miami. He had this misogynist PowerPoint at Texas A&M for women in football night or whatever. And it's something worth addressing, right? Obviously, we wrote about it when he got hired. This is the first and probably only time we're going to talk to him for the next year. So I asked him, you have controversy in your past. Did you have to address that with Greg? And are you confident you could avoid controversy at Rutgers? Before I even finished the question, when I said, Jim, you have controversy in your past, he immediately goes, yes, I did. Yes, I did. And he said he's looking about moving forward. He did say that everyone has their opinions and some he doesn't agree with. So clearly he doesn't. I think that the controversy stuff is as big of a deal as some of us have made it out to be. But he said that, him and Greg talked about it and they're ready to move forward. So about as good of an answer as you could expect. And listen, I think there's no reason to think that he won't avoid controversy at Rutgers, but he does, to me, strike me as a no nonsense kind of guy. So I think as far as the football coaching goes, which I think is what most people care about, from his past at Texas A&M, he has a really good reputation of developing non-headline recruits into a solid unit. And I think that's what Rutgers fans are going to hope for with a lot of options this year on the line. Can he mold those guys into a solid unit? And I would think so, but we'll see.
Yeah, you would think that the line, we should be past the days where, you're looking at the line, it's just this major problem. There should be enough bodies in there, certainly enough coaching, the pipeline. We've been filling that thing. no more time can we say, we haven't filled the pipeline. Oh, it's loaded with Greg Schiano players. This has got to be, it can't be bad. It's got to be an upgrade. You made this change. You could have stuck with Pat Flaherty. You made this decision to go. If the line's not good, it is a major failure, I think.
Right. And I think the line won't be bad, right? Which is always an upgrade from, as you said, the past, right? Where the line's been bad. I think they have enough bodies. They're at a point now where they're, instead of looking for bodies to fill spots, right? Now they have enough bodies where they get to pick who fits into what spot, right? There is some depth. I don't know if there's high-end talent, but you have a lot of candidates for tackle. You have some interesting candidates for center, guards. You have some guys coming back. So it's interesting. It's going to be interesting to see who is the initial five. I asked Jim Turner if he has a sense of who those guys are, and he says they're not even close, which makes sense. It's the first and second week of spring. Lots of competition, but I think we're beyond the days of like, all right, we need a body to play left tackle. Now we're at a point where Rutgers has had a decent couple years, not a great year last year, but they've had enough. They're at a point where it's like, okay, this line should be solid. Can they take the next step forward?
All right. Take a couple questions since we have some football questions. I think this is a good one from the Discord. If you're in the Discord, been quiet, mostly quiet, kind of quiet. We yell at each other occasionally. All right. Jordan E23 wants to know, which is more likely this year for football? A new solid quarterback emerges or the defense makes a big improvement jump? What do you think?
Fascinating question. In an ideal world, obviously you get both, right?
Right.
Which is more likely? Well, how big of a jump are we saying? Going from the worst in the country to middle of the pack?
Yeah, that would be a big jump. It's hard to do that, but that would be a bit when you're like, okay, the defense, when you watch them playing, this defense is much better.
I would say it's more likely they have an upgrade on the defense than they do to have a similar output on quarterback, right? Ethan Kaliakmanis, obviously one of the best quarterbacks in program history. It's a high bar for either of those guys to meet. Whereas I think going from the worst defense in the Big Ten to mediocre is much more attainable. So I would say the latter.
That's funny. I totally disagree. I think it's the opposite. I think because of the things we talk about, like if you plug in Ethan wasn't like a superstar, big arm. He was a good quarterback who could read where the ball needed to go. He was accurate. He could move. You still have a team that's going to be built around Antoine Raymond, around KJ Duff. You still have like a collection of playmakers. You would think the line, as we discussed just a moment ago, would be good. So you have all the ingredients that I would think that you should be able to plug in a guy who's at that same level or close to that level. Like, I don't expect the drop off to be like, Gavin Wimsatt, throwing 6 feet over the heads of players. I think it should be something about the same. I'm not saying, I get it. Ethan was really good. But I don't think there'll be a big drop off there. The defense, meanwhile, like I didn't see anything that happened in the offseason to make me go, wow, they added a bunch of guys here. This is going to be a big upgrade. The coaching staff's new. It's going to be some adjustment there for new coaches. Like, I think there's more reason to be concerned about that than the quarterback.
I would agree. I think it's possible both get better. And I think, or I should say both of those scenarios play out. I just think with the defense, the difference between Travis Johansson and Rob Smith is hard to exaggerate, right? So I think just having that will make a big difference for the defense. And the new guys, again, the bar is so low that it would be a surprise if they weren't better. With quarterback, I have a hard time. I think the ceiling for the quarterback is matching what Ethan did. I don't know if they can be better than Ethan because he set the bar so high. But you never know.
but matching would be, I mean, they would sign for that certainly right now. Yeah. And the defense, now you talk about, it was really bad last year. Like I'm thinking about some of the games, like the Oregon game, even crossed that one off. There were some games where it was just, it was rough. Yeah. It can't be any worse than that. It got better late in the year. They're filling in I still have a lot of questions about what, the secondary is going to look like, who's going to be will they finally have a pass rusher? There's still a lot of personnel questions on that unit too. So even as Greg Shannon calls it, the most talented, we haven't talked about that. I thought that was a very interesting comment. I guess, this is what coaches say going into spring football. This is the most talent we've had in the building since we've been back. And my reaction was, I don't know if I agree with that. Like a couple of years ago, Kareem Powell, he had a defense that was one of the best in the Big Ten. If you had a quarterback on that team, you would have been, it could have been 9-3. You could have pulled off the big upset over Ohio State. Like I thought that comment was strange, like not strange, but I disagreed with that. Your thoughts?
I think he did have the caveat of like a lot of those guys won't play, right? So I think when he says a lot of talent in the building, he means the freshman and sophomore who could eventually, develop into really good players. Yeah. So, he gets the best of both worlds. He gets to talk about the talent in the building to build the excitement, but he does pump some brakes on. You might not see a lot of it this year. That's more of a future deal. Because you think about guys like Whitey Collier-Johnson, who's a redshirt freshman who just turned 18, freakishly long arms, explosive edge. Like you might not see what he could do, this year, but in a year or two, like you could see him being a really high-end edge rusher, right? So that's, I think, more of what he was saying. The big part of all of this, obviously, is you may have a lot of young talent in the building. You better make sure you keep it for the next 2 years so that they're showing their talent at Rutgers and not somewhere else.
Right. Yeah. And this is the reason why there's no spring game or no opportunity to showcase these guys for another program down the line. Absolutely. Yeah.
The thing is, though, if they showcase themselves in the spring game, they can't get poached because the portal isn't open again until the winter.
But they could start the poaching process. I mean,
I guess, but if you have a guy that's good enough that he's going to get poached from a spring game, you would think he's going to play in the fall. So it's a moot point.
You're right.
Anyway, I don't mean to imply I care that much about the spring game. I'm just kind of pushing back on that narrative. That's all.
Okay. Fair enough. All right. Let's see what other questions we have. Okay. Here's one basketball question. Maybe I'm misremembering, but given Yukon is on its way to a third national championship appearance in 4 years, was Pikel to Yukon actually ever considered beyond here's a list of names that could be interested? How would things be different if that does happen? And there's no way that Hurley ends up back at Rutgers in that scenario, right? I don't think it was ever a real thing. No.
If Steve Pikel had graduated from any other school, nobody would have even thought to connect those two together. I don't think that was very real. And I think that some of the extensions Pat Hobbs gave Steve Pikel were under the pretense of him having interest from other schools. But other than maybe Notre Dame, when they had that opening after Mike Bray and Steve Pikel was a hot commodity, that one I could see being, some realistic interest both ways there. But I just don't. I mean, they got Danny Hurley, who was at that time already a really hot coaching commodity. I just don't think that if Steve Pikel was on the list, I would say he was probably very far down the list, is what I would say.
It's funny. This I do remember when the job opened, and of course, Rutgers tried to hire Dan Hurley first, and that was real. And they were trying negotiations, certainly trying to move earth to get Dan Hurley here. I do remember this conversation I had with one of Dan Hurley's people, best I could describe it, and just discussing whether or not he should take the job. And my thing to him was exact quote at the time was like, he should take the job because all you have to do, the bar is so low, all you have to do is get this team back to the postseason, and they're going to give you a lifetime contract. It's just you're going to lay out all this money, which is exactly what happened for Steve Pikel. Would have happened to Dan Hurley. He probably did okay. Probably made a better career choice. Don't listen to me for your career advice. This is what I'm trying to tell you.
Yes. And what I would say is that a lot of people, they do have that thought of, wow, what if Dan Hurley had taken that job back in the day? Like, where would Rutgers be right now? The answer is probably exactly where they are, because Dan Hurley, if he did take Rutgers to the NCAA tournament or whatever, he'd be gone, because he's smart enough to know that, this is not Yukon. This is not a place where you have continued sustained success, because there isn't the investment in the program the same way there is at Yukon, which is, again, that was, I correct me if I'm wrong, that was the major sticking point with Dan Hurley, is he didn't feel there was enough investment in the program for him to have a chance of success, right? That's why he didn't want to take the job.
Yes, it was a different program then. Remember, they hadn't built the facilities yet. Yeah, there was just a lot of concern. The history, I think he was concerned about everything, and rightfully so. Right, and waited it out, and it turned out pretty good for him. Yeah, and then and Dan also knew, this is the other part of it. Dan also knew what a lot of people who weren't on the inside didn't like. He knew he was in there. So he knew the problems better than he saw. He saw what happened under Bannon when things unraveled. I think in a lot of ways, like that experience as an assistant coach and everything that happened drove him to high school basketball. Like there was a chance that he was not going to come back. Like he was very content. And I can't tell you how many conversations I had with Dan Hurley, head coach at St. Benedict's Prep, where we were talking about it. And I would say, well, you're going to go back to college, right? And he would get insulted. He'd be like, why do I have to do that? My father proved you could have a great life, get into the Hall of Fame by coaching high school. Like it was very, I'm sorry. Like, okay, just assumed you would make the step back. Of course he did. But after, and looking at his resume, I went through it the other day, I forgot how long he was at St. Benedict's. It's like 10 years he was at coaching high school basketball. It's kind of fascinating, like you think about that and the way that shaped him. And I think he wouldn't be the coach he was now without that experience, because, he saw a lot of ways to build teams doing that, and learned a lot coaching wise, just as an X's and O's coach. He's a great basketball coach. Like for all of the BS, all of the headbutts and the, jarring at fans. I mean, look at what he did to Duke. Look at the comeback in that game. He pantsed little Coach K.
Dan Hurley, John Shire. John Shire, who's building a reputation as a generational choker, and a guy who was born on home plate, thinks he hit a grand slam, because it's the Duke thing where you get the most talented team in the country twice. You have a double-digit lead against the top team and you blow it. Anyway, Dan Hurley's lived a fascinating basketball life. I am curious about what's going to happen, coach, because they run one of the most intricate offenses I've ever seen in a college basketball team. It's fascinating stuff.
And a lot of fun to watch.
Very fun to watch. The thing that it gets credit for that, though, is Luke Murray. He gets a lot of credit for that. Now he's going to be the head coach of BC. Will he take all of that offensive philosophy with him? Is some of that Dan Hurley infused? I'm sure he has some part of that.
I think a lot of that's Dan. Yeah.
It's very possible, right? Maybe it's Dan passing some of the credit off to his assistant coach, and he had a big part in it. I don't know, but what I will say is they are incredibly well coached, incredibly well oiled machine. And Dan Hurley's a hell of a coach. I am curious if they do win tonight, which I don't think they will, but if they do win 3 national championships in 4 years, I know he turned down the Lakers, so he probably won't get poached by anybody else. But is he just going to be a Yukon lifer? I can't imagine he's going to do this for another 20 years.
That's a great question. Yeah, and I think that the days of people staying like Dean Smith 36 years at a place, I think that like my Coach K 40 years at a place, I think that's very hard to do in the current climate. It's just, and college basketball is hard. It's hard to do here. And once you set that, like he has set this expectation, which is just completely unrealistic. And I also wonder about the league. I get it. Like, the Big East is back in the national championship game. Well, no, it's Yukon. And I think we're going to see, already seeing what's happening. Look at the Big Ten. Like, this is a topic of conversation right here. Like the Big Ten now going to have the football championship. I think had the women's basketball championship. I think it's going to win them tonight. When they can go through a list of things, wrestling always wins. Like every single thing is going to be these conferences for a reason. Like, and it's going to be harder and harder. And I wonder that part of it. Just take it out of everything else out of the equation. Being in the same place is hard. Winning in the same place is hard. But now that just the Big East is going to be hard. So yeah, I would not be surprised if the Knicks job opens up in a couple of years, and that's the one that Dan Hurley says, "Oh, I'm gone."
I can see that going. I don't know if it's a better job than the Lakers, but it's certainly closer to home and would make the most sense.
Indeed.
Anyway, let's go back to Rutgers, because we're the Rutgers Rant.
There's like 15 things more interesting than what's going on at Rutgers. That's the problem. Who's going to win? You think here, 7.5. Make a pick.
Michigan
minus 7.5.
Michigan, easily.
Yeah,
I can see Michigan minus 19.5.
Yeah. I thought Michigan was going to win before this. Like, I'm very rarely the moment I saw them, like they're going to win the national championship. But what they did to Arizona, I was like, forget it. Because I thought I was watching the Arizona game in the Elite Eight. I'm like, oh, let's go. Arizona could beat them. It's just he destroyed them. Yeah. So I agree with you too. I would lay the points if I had to.
The thing is, not only is Michigan uber talented, not only do they have size and athleticism and versatility that no other team has, they have a savant as a head coach. Dusty May, and I know some of this stuff can seem hokey or whatever, but he's got them practicing shooting at the big house before playing in a football stadium, which I can't believe no other coach has thought to do. I don't know if you saw the story of him telling Elliot Cadeau to intentionally miss layups because they can't throw lobs because Arizona's size would prevent the lobs. So instead of throwing a lob, he would throw lobs off the backboard. So the opposing team would think it's a missed field goal, but their bigs were ready to get it as offensive rebounds and dunk. Like that's stuff that's like, and I'm sure other coaches think about stuff like this, but Dusty May to me seems like him and Dan Hurley are like basketball savants.
Yeah.
So you have all that combination. It's hard to beat. Anyway, I don't know if you have any more questions, but I have a question for you, Steve. Have you thrown your name in yet in the class action lawsuit as a New Jersey taxpayer to get your money back from Rutgers Athletics?
I love the fact that people blame us, and by us I mean Sarge, for this. Like, I love that the narrative. Oh, Sarge hadn't written the story that we write every single year that every college market writes. Only difference is that this is the only one that's 500 million in the hole. If we hadn't done that story, this wouldn't happen. I love that. I love the lawsuit. I don't know, like, apparently he's like a real lawyer, I guess. But most people think it'll get dismissed, but will it be discovery? I'll put my name on that. Pay like get lunch, get like $12 for the sub today for lunch. How much are we all getting back out of this lawsuit?
You'll get a Venmo payment for $7.12 5 years from now, but you completely forgot about this lawsuit, just like every other class action I've joined. So he is Hector Rodriguez. He is a lawyer in New Brunswick, a former county judge who many people were quick to throw this link that I included in the story back at us. He was reprimanded for making a sexually charged comment from the chair as a judge in Somerset County, and he was taken off as a judge. Now, look, this lawsuit, I did not take a single law class. I'm smart enough to know that it has 0% chance, right?
Zero.
Like, this has zero merit, obviously. Right. I do think it was interesting what he was asking, right? He wanted an independent review of the financial situation. He wanted Rutgers to not be able to spend tax money without legislative approval. And he wanted the Rutgers to pay restitution to the state of New Jersey. I mean, this is, if you're going to go for it, he went.
Absolutely.
Shoot the moon,
baby. Yes.
Right. I don't think there will be discovery. One, because I think this will be tossed out well before that. And two, I think the last thing Rutgers wants is discovery. So if they have to settle, they will. But again, I just don't think they'll come anywhere close to that. But I think what he achieved his primary goal, which was getting his name in the headlines and bring attention to this matter, which clearly it did.
And this is what we've talked about, because I think you and I agree. I do not care at this point how much money Rutgers loses on athletics. And it's like a conversation I had with Bob Mulcahy like 20 years ago, where it's like, you can either rip them for losing or rip them for spending. It's very difficult to do both. I think they're spending too much. I think there's places you can cut. I think they now have a revenue and a spending problem. 100%, but it's whatever. But I do think what happens, and with this every year, is it gets to the point where if there's enough attention, like the dominoes fall on something like this. This one's not a good example, but eventually there's going to be a governor, or there's going to be a president, or somebody will call attention, and that's where it becomes a problem. That's where the spending is an issue. It's not like, they're going to cut this. It's just getting the attention where someone calls it. It becomes a thing that they have to deal with. And I think that's the concern. And, it's going to be like this again next year. They're going to have to deal with the same questions. They're going to blame us again next year, when it's just going to be a bigger number that we're going to report, and they're going to pretend it's accounting. And we're going to do this whole thing over again, right? Until you get it to a manageable level where it's not this holy shit number. We're going to do this every year.
The fascinating thing to me is that every year, like, oh, they do this stuff every year. They write the same story every year. Well, how about the fact Rutgers keeps losing money every year? If Rutgers had not lost more money year upon year, we would write a different story. If Rutgers made money next year, we would write that story at the same verve as we wrote this one, right?
And they say, and the other part is like, they never write the benefits of the Big. Yes, we do. Like, fully understand the benefit of being in the Big Ten. I've written the story. We've covered that part of it. The increased enrollment. The Rutgers is far better positioned than it was 10 years ago, because of this. And absolutely understand. So, yeah, here we are again.
It is.
No one wants to hear this.
No, but to your point, there was the Fairleigh Dickinson poll of voters, which this shows how uninformed voters are, right? Where the question was not properly worded because people want them to spend less money on Rutgers football, where the issue is like Rutgers football does bring in money, right? That if the accounting was correct, football and men's basketball are the two sports that are positive, whereas all the other sports are losing money. But that if you change that question to Rutgers athletics getting less funding, and then you would probably have to cut sports like volleyball and field hockey and all that stuff, then that becomes a different question where people will be less inclined to reduce funding, right? So I do think that football gets unfairly portrayed as the boogeyman here because, again, they do make money, and they are the reason for the big media rights money coming in.
Yes.
But that's the sexier topic. And
that poll was dopey. Yeah. But anyway.
And it's not our fault. I want to be clear. It's not our fault that people misinterpret the numbers because we clearly laid out the numbers in our very well reported story. Yeah. But I do understand some of the angst that would come out of the Hale Center for seeing that, thinking, "What? It's not our fault. We make the money."
Right. So. A couple more topics. Gymnastics. Hey, good performance. Had they become Rutgers' second best team? As far as attention goes, NCAA's newly advanced, pretty good.
They might be the best. They might be the team of the year at this point. So they finished in the top 20 nationally because they were the last team in the field, 36 out of the 36 team in the 36 team field. They beat Central Michigan in a play-in to get into the Lexington Regional, and they came within a hair. If they had one or two better scores, namely on beam, they would have beaten Ohio State. They already beat Kentucky. They had a better score than Kentucky, which to have a better score than an SEC team is incredible. They almost beat Ohio State. They probably should have beat Ohio State. They had their second best score of the year, their best score in program history at the NCAAs. And again, came within a hair of advancing to the regional final. And they obviously couldn't compete with Oklahoma, which is the best team in the country. And I think they've won 3 of the last 5 national titles or something like that. But for Rutgers to even be in this conversation after where they were as a program for the last 10 years is incredible. And I think Anastasia Candia deserves a lot of credit for what she's done with this program. 2 years in a row in regionals. And a very impressive showing this weekend. Again, as we're standing right now, and barring a big reversal from any of the spring sports still competing, the gymnastics team is going to be the best team in the department once again, maybe for the second year in a row.
Women's crew. Come on, don't fall on women's crew here. Come on.
Fair. Women's crew did win a big regatta last year, but it wasn't NCAA sanctioned.
They rang the bell for that. Come on.
They did. In total fairness, yes. Women's crew also had a big year last year. We'll see what they can do this year. But women's gymnastics deserves a lot of credit. We wrote a lot about what happened last year off the mat, deservedly so. But this year they deserve a lot of credit for what they did on the mat.
Okay. Big lots going on for Gary Reedus, who's hit the ground running, a stealing a recruit from Penn State, which was always a get the fans happy, but also a legit 4-star player. The entire team's gone, so he's going to have to bring in some more players too.
Yeah, portal opened at midnight. A lot of action already outside of Rutgers, right? It hasn't been a lot of surprise at Rutgers yet, but going to have to rebuild the entire roster, and he's going to do so with a staff that's built. Roman Tubner, the Tennessee assistant we thought would be on staff, is not. Close friend of Gary Reedus, but it looks like he's pursuing head coaching jobs after getting fired by Tennessee. But he did hire his sister, as we expected, Manisha Reedus. He hired another former LSU player as an assistant. This is interesting, an on-3 recruiting writer as his general manager, which would be like hiring, for example, Alec Crowdhamel to be the general manager at LSU women's basketball, or one of us, which, as much as I love takes on the Rutgers Rant, I'm not quite sure I am in position to build a basketball team.
Wouldn't be good at that. Yep.
So interesting decision there. I know he has some experience coaching AAU, and he was, an in-depth beat writer of the women's basketball team, but still, that's going to be a head scratcher that they're going to have to overcome. But big couple of weeks here for Gary Reedus and his staff to build their first roster and see what they can do.
And the last thing I have on my list, you might have more, but President Wynn tweeted. That's all I got right here. So that's what the note says. More President Wynn Twitter magic. And it was great. And I think it went over people's heads, which makes it even better because I did this. I put that on Twitter. Like, this is perfect because if you hadn't been following what happened, President Wynn explains the way not to apologize. If you want to look insincere, here's how you should apologize. He put it in ChatGPT. He did a screenshot of how ChatGPT explains how not to apologize. The only public figure who issued an apology like that, of course, Gino Auriemma, for just embarrassing himself after the Final Four loss to Dawn Staley and South Carolina. Clearly, this was the president again, very subtly, like his wire reference, which that one I didn't quite get. This one I knew right away. I was like, ha! But a lot of people didn't catch it. Did you catch it? Did you know right away?
I caught it because I was all over the Gino reaction, and I love the Twitter aftermath of all that was wonderful. So I got it right away. But 2 or 3 people DM me and they're like, "What is this about? What's going on?" Yep. And I had to explain it to them, and they felt almost disappointed. It was not more like Rutgers centric drama. But yeah, this is the fun part of having a president who will just tweet stuff out like this. He'll get it in the mix with being a little having a little plausible deniability. I will say. I gotta
read it out loud. I just pulled it up again, which is so great. Leadership lesson 1. After a major public display of character flaws, it begins. Don't write a ChatGPT prompt that says, and then he asked ChatGPT, apologize without sounding sincere or mentioning the aggrieved party's name. It's so great, man. It's just perfect.
Yes. Just to explain, South Carolina destroyed Yukon in the semifinals in the Final Four. Yukon was undefeated. And Gino Auriemma in the handshake line said something to Dawn Staley, something about not shaking his hand at the beginning of the game or whatever. Dawn reacted almost confused and angry. Yes. They were separated. And then the next day, Gino Auriemma writes a half sincere apology statement without using Dawn Staley's name. He said something about South Carolina staff or whatever. So President Wynn, who is increasingly, obviously, a huge women's basketball fan, decided to get into the mix there. So
just perfect. Just perfect. All right. That's all I got. You got anything else? Final thoughts?
I got nothing else really. Baseball, softball, men's lacrosse, women's lacrosse are all kind of in the swing of their season. Some disappointing results over the weekend for most of those programs, but there's still some time to, fix yourself in the spring and for any of them, ideally make the NCAA tournament. None of them look great right now, but you would hope at least one of them do, because as we're sitting today, gymnastics and I guess wrestling, if you count them, are the only programs that have competed in the NCAA so far, which is shaping up to be a rough Directors Cup finish once again for Rutgers.
You know who's competing for Rutgers this week? Chris Gotterup, first golfer in Rutgers history to play at the Masters. He talks at 2 p.m. today. First guy in the interview room, which is interesting. So he'll be down there. Unlikely, I would say this. I think the last first-time Masters winner, like first time you play at the Masters, you win. Fuzzy Zeller, I think. If I'm doing my Masters history correct, that is, we're talking, 40, 45 years-ish. So it would be unlikely for him to win, but his odds are plus 4,500. So they're not crazy.
So what you're saying is don't throw a $5 on Chris Gotterup.
I would definitely throw a $5. Why not? That's a good payback. Throw a $5 on him. I would say that it's, a long shot, but not a crazy long shot. Not like a wild one.
Well, we'll see. Now we have a reason to watch the Masters if you're a Rutgers fan or reporter like us. So
got a reason to watch the Masters. The Masters. That's the only reason you need to watch the Masters.
The azaleas.
All right. We'll sign off there. We'll be back, I think, a week or two. We'll see. We'll give some portal time. We'll give Steve time to work his magic here in the portal. And we'll come back and we'll see if our prediction was correct. But thanks for listening.
Thank you for listening to the Rutgers Rant, sponsored by the Heldridge Hotel. Head to nj.com/Rutgers for more Scarlet Knight content.